Good morning. It is September 29th. We are at the end of God, we're at the end of September. October is upon us as we enter the final quarter of 2025. Mm, I'm coffeeed out this morning, so I'm gonna try to get a little bit more water in my system. These are these fancy sparkling waters. I keep them around for other people, but they'll do for me this morning, right? All right, welcome to Coffee Talk. As I said, we're at the end of September. We are in the beginning of the last quarter of 2025, and now I always said we're at that quiet last week. I think I said we're at that quiet period, right? And things will pick up again when we get to SEMA, but a couple of weeks before this fourth quarter in the automotive industry is always very interesting. And we've got some really good things to talk about. I'm kind of going to go a little bit I'm going to go on a tangent and a tear at the same time. So we got some interesting things to cover. Go ahead and get comfortable, folks. Pour yourself a cup of coffee, whatever you need this morning, because we're going to talk about consumer education on sticker shock. So I'm seeing lots and lots of news articles, written and video for local news shows. I'm seeing things pop up all over the country. And yeah, we're going to talk about them because if we don't take control of our own messaging, then someone for clicks will. Now, I'm a big fan of clickbait and all those other things. That's how the internet works. But it can work to our disadvantage. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about one of my favorite topics. Are DRPs in and of themselves ensure bad faith? And some things that are changing and what's different from when DRPs sort of really took off in the beginning of the 90s to where we are today, and has that evolved into bad faith. And some fantastic news. Toby Chess is back, folks, and I'm going to give you the story of all of that, kind of from my perspective in the back, the standing in the back of the wings with insurers. We are going to talk about how claims continue to sink, and they're sinking fast. A little bit. Some of the numbers that are out are a little bit more than even I thought they would be. And I'm supposed to be Chicken Little, talking nothing about bad news all the time. So if I'm sort of impressed with the numbers, then there's a lot of things that we need to look at. All right, we're also going to talk about rules in play for RTA as more and more states begin to either pass rules for appraisal or are experiencing issues with right to appraisal. There's rules coming down. So what do those look like? How will they affect it? What are some things that we need to know? We're just going to talk about it. More job cuts across the industry as Yanni from Eagle MMS put out a very good post this past week about how this is the most silent economic disaster recession that he's ever remembered. In the middle of the 2007, 2008 debacle, it was all over the news. We talked about it constantly. We are worse, I think, than when we were then. And it's really not something anybody's talking about. We're feeling it, but it doesn't have the same press coverage. And so he did a really good job of sort of breaking down everything that's been happening over the last year. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about that too today. We're gonna talk about the tech shortage. Is there really one? Is there not a tech shortage? I've been historically vocal on my beliefs around that, and even caused quite a little kerfuffle at an industry event 10 or 12 years ago or whatever, talking about that. We're going to talk about the role of the shop in the supplement process, and what it is and what it isn't, and why that's going to become extremely legally important as we finish out this fourth quarter and we head into 2026. There's a lot of shops, you do stuff every day and you do it because you've always done it or the industry has always allowed it, but you're actually violating a few laws in the process. And then we're going to talk about the Coffee Talk Roadshow. So Coffee Talk is going on the road. It starts tomorrow, actually. I got to go get on a plane tomorrow. So I'm going to go over where you can see the Coffee Talk Roadshow, and then talk about some potential plans for where that show may go as we get into 2026. All right, let's get to it. Here we go. First out of the gate, sticker shock. we've always in this industry, this isn't nothing new. This is a TV show that did a little piece, or a TV show, a news station in Ohio that did a little piece this past week, and a bunch of shops were sending it to me. In our business, there has always been sort of an assumption that things should be cheaper. I started writing handwriting estimates in the shop as a kid. So you go back to the 80s and people used to come in and you'd write them an estimate and they go, I can't believe it costs that much. So the disconnect between what it costs to do something and what people are willing to pay, that goes across every industry out there. Our industry is there's a little bit of a difference now because parts and some other things have changed so drastically that obviously repairs cost more, right? We even look at our estimates, and I know the industry will say, well, the average should be somewhere around 4,000. You can't write an OEM compliant estimate these days on a bumper scratch and have an estimate that's probably, less than 8 grand these days, it seems, when you look at everything that goes around the part. And I think consumers, even insurers, and even some body shops, you get so focused on the part, but it's just a scratch on a bumper. It shouldn't cost that much. So in this particular news feature, obviously, when a news cycle gets slow, you send a reporter out and you go, hey, let's find something to talk about. I like the lead. The average repair now over $800. Bumper repairs can cost thousands. Okay, so don't let the news within your market go out and find people to interview and then position the story in whatever way that they think is going to get the most attention, whether they're running the 5 o'clock slot, the 6 o'clock slot, or the 10 o'clock slot, right? You need to be sort of in control of that. So at shops, you've got to start making content. You've got to get content out there. There's not an entity in this industry that's going to do that for you. There's not it's not like even if iCar made content, the average consumer is not going to find it because it's not in their algorithm, so to speak. Like they don't cross that. There's no crossover. If you want to get it in front of people, you've got to figure out what the content algorithm is and what feeds it up to people. And that's going to be people in local, people you're connected to, friends of friends, pieces of a content that have, other people have shared. So you're going to have to create some content. It's going to become more and more important as we talk a little bit later in today's show about what's happening with claims and claim counts and claim volume and what people are, their expectations for their insurance versus their expectations for themselves. So you're going to need to control this. As we talk about tariffs, there's a lot of like fear mongering around them, and they do have a direct impact on our industry. But as the media begins to fearmonger, one of the first things that you want to do is you want to tell people how much more this is going to drive up everything you have, and repair costs are now 30% higher than they were before, and that's that really is individuals that have to carry that burden of those costs, and it's not just always, oh, there's insurance to pay for that. But so as the news begins to fight for that story and they want to pit American economics and American family against government or whatever, our industry's right there in the middle of that. And so it's important for you to tell that story. It is thousands of dollars for a bumper cover repair, but here's why. Some of it may be the cost of parts, and there's a difference in parts. Yes, the OE wants to charge this for this bumper cover, and there's an aftermarket one available for this, but here's the differences between those and why it's important. Here's the electronics. Here's everything else that's involved in the repair. And start explaining that so that people understand it's not metal and paint or plastic and paint. There's always going to be somebody in the market willing to do something cheaper. There's always going to be people in the market that will do something for pennies on the dollar. In major metro areas, there's a lot more of that than in other places. But so there's always somebody that'll come in at the price point a consumer wants or perceives that they want to pay. If we don't change the narrative around all of this on our own, what really a repair entails, then we're to blame for the effects of that. So as I see these written articles, news stories on the nightly news, human interest pieces, etc. Um, Pick up and they're telling the story, it's going to be real, real important that you tell your own story, that you use real examples of vehicles that are in your facility, how one shop in town may have thought it was only this, but this is what it really ends up being and why. And consumers can choose different grades of repair, but you can't choose different cost of repair. And that's very, very important that we drive home. Good cost more, bad cost is less. Like it's not like we can get the same repair for two different prices. I had a very long this was not a verbal conversation. I had a very long, drawn out email back and forth with an insurance adjuster and a manager. They had reached out to me. I don't know why. They wanted to talk about repair cost and the necessities of some things that a shop had on their estimate that they didn't feel like they owe. And I'm like, and you elected to call me to discuss it? That doesn't seem like that, whatever. But we went back and forth on certain things, and that was one of the things that fundamentally we had to try to understand. What you perceive as cost savings is literally quality savings. And those two things aren't the same. I can't get a good repair for less money. It's impossible. And if we don't do our job as shops to tell that story, that the dollar amount changes, quite frankly, live or die in the next, accident. If we're not telling that story on our own, then shame on us. And that's not PRI stories. I do love a good PRI story, and I think they're powerful. But but that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just here's a repair, but here's what's involved in it. You may look at it and only see a bumper scratch, but this is what it takes. And once you can do that, you never see a car again. That's why people post pictures online and we go, oh, that's a total. And people go, it literally just needs a fender. And I go, well, yeah, but if you look at everything that goes around the fender that we're going to have to do because we did the fender, it adds up quickly. And it's a 92 Camry, so it's a goner. Like, I don't know, if you just want to order a fender off Amazon and bolt it on yourself, cool. But here's what it takes. So make sure that if you are a shop or you're even an employee in a shop, does my shop have social media? Are we on all of the platforms? Are we telling the story of our business and why we're different and what stands out between different things? Please don't let the nightly news or your local Ohio news station be the one that is telling your story to consumers or slanting that story in any way. Okay, let's talk about it. I'm so happy. That Toby Chess is back, so to speak. Okay, so for those, I'm gonna give you the short version. Toby Chess is out in California. He is a longtime trainer in the collision repair industry. I would, kind of gray beard, kind of think of him like Santa Claus in a little way. But Toby is, God, he does iCar welding validations. He used to have this trailer. He may still have this trailer he would tow behind his truck, and he would go around and train shops in California. Very, very knowledgeable. He would do presentations at CIC, kind of every CIC, they'd have this like tech feature. And it was all, Toby was always the one that did it. Super smart dude, incredible. And then one day LKQ squashed it all. So yeah, LKQ, this is your get back. Like I've been waiting. I looked at the date. This was like 2010 when this happened. So I've been waiting literally 15 years to shove this one up your, well, But anyway, all right. So Toby was doing these technical presentations, and it was 2010 at the January CIC in Palm Springs. I feel like I should have this like where the screen does the doodly doo doodly doo doodly, and we like go time warp back. Now, I did look for if I could find any of what had happened. I really couldn't find any of the pictures. I thought there might have been a video. This is just proof. Back in 2010, I was begging CIC to let me shoot video and like do a live broadcast to CIC so that the people at home could see what was happening. And no, they didn't want that. You had to be a member and you needed to come to the meetings. And now I'm like, if I would have been recording it, we would have had the footage for forever and it would not have gotten away. But anyway, so Toby in January does this really cool demo at CIC where he's going to talk about the difference between OE parts and aftermarket parts. And from a very we'll call it molecular level. So we had, I believe it was a bumper support, like a bumper reinforcement bar at that meeting. And Toby very scientifically pulls out a Sawzall. And bring power tools to any industry association meeting, and you have my attention anyway already. But Toby basically has this OEM rebar, and he hits it with this Sawzall, and nothing happens, right? The blade's just bouncing up and down because it's high strength steel, right? Like nothing's going through it. And he turns around, he puts the same blade on the aftermarket part, and it just like cuts like butter. And the whole audience is like, oh my God. You can see everybody. The insurers start kind of like losing it, but trying to keep it together. There's shops in the room, there's OEs in the room, just giggling in the background. This was also about the same time that Ford Motor Company, so Ford themselves, had put out a video. And it featured Larry, was it Larry Cohen? Um, he's Ron, who was in Mob Steel. Larry is Ron's brother, and two polar opposite children, if you ever saw them in your life. But so Larry's in the video for Ford Motor Company, and they're talking about the difference between aftermarket and OE parts, but it was about the same time that Ford had that video out. You see the OEs just smiling like ear to ear. The insurers are kind of panicking. And then, of course, also at CIC, it was at that time a larger contingent of companies that were importers and resellers of aftermarket body components. And there was an aftermarket association. And one of the women that ran that association, I found her to be very lovely and wonderful and knowledgeable, and call her a friend. And I still call her a friend to this day. But it was just sort of like the chaos that erupted in the room was beautiful. And so if you know me, you know I love chaos, right? I love anything that's different or whatever. And so now it's April of 2010, and we are in Atlanta, Georgia for the next CIC. So CIC meets 4 times a year. And Toby has a part two of this presentation planned. Now, I'm going to tell you, we were all on pins and needles. I think that's typically at a CIC, you'll have, let's just say, let's pick a round number. There's 300 people that are going to come to the CIC meeting. There's probably only 75 of them in the meeting, and the rest of them are out in the hallway or taking a lunch somewhere. Like there's more business that goes on outside of the room of CIC than goes on in it. So like for the first 30 minutes of a CIC, the whole room's packed. Everybody's waving their hands. And did you see me? Because I told my boss I was coming to this and I'm using company money. But now that you've seen me, I'm going to go play golf or do whatever else these people disappear to. But you could tell that no one was missing part two of Toby's demonstration. But about before Toby could do it, he was threatened with a lawsuit by LKQ. Now, LKQ comes back and says, no, we never really did it. I think if you read this article, no, we were just calling and asking questions about the whatever. But I can very clearly remember that day, and I can remember the back of the room, and specifically the people who, we'll just use air quotes, represented LKQ, and knowing what that particular person, what she did for a living, what her background was, what she was, let's just say, licensed and trained in, I firmly believe they threatened Toby with a lawsuit. So even though LKQ, for disclosure, LKQ says, no, we were just asking people on the committees and whatever a lot of questions. I don't think anyone cancels a presentation because somebody asked a lot of questions. But bottom line, part two of Toby's presentation on the difference between aftermarket and OEM parts did not happen. Now, personally, I was a little like, let's just do it. I mean, I think them filing a suit would be fantastic. We already had multiple suits kind of going on between LKQ vendors, and I think LKQ may have been involved as well as different OEs over parts. I was like, let's just add to the soup, right? This opens up a whole other level of discovery. But that's easy to say when you're not the ones paying the bill, right? When somebody's suing you. I would have personally, I would have loved to seen the industry become more vocal, supportive, and been like partnered together and like, let's take them on. There were people and associations that made comments that they were unhappy with LKQ. But that doesn't help Toby, right? Like you can be unhappy, but if I move on and go forward with this and I do In today's day and age, you can sue anybody for anything. You may not win, but that still doesn't mean it's not going to cost me money defending myself, right? You kind of I don't blame him. But what sort of happened is that really changed the presentations that were going on at CIC. It changed the presentations that were going on in a lot of places. A lot of associations got a little scared. They didn't want to get sued. They, not just whether Toby was going to get sued, but they didn't want to get sued. So it changed a lot. And what was a very powerful demonstration went away. But good news. And over, I was gleeful. I mean, I probably almost was giggling like, I don't know, like I was 12 years old again when this story popped up last week from Autobody News. Now, I hate to push the trade press because I just think they screw up a lot of stuff, right? But you need to go find this article. It's in Autobody News. It's from September 22nd, written by Toby himself. And the title of the article is Following OEM Repair Procedures and Using OEM Parts Crucial to Safe and Proper Repairs. Now, when you find it, print it and save it. Save it as a PDF. Make sure you have a digital format of this. Make sure that you have a hard copy of it, as I like to say. But do not assume that this may stay very long. I would hope that we've come a long way since 2010 and that it does stay, because reading through it, it is excellent. Toby did a fantastic job with this one. Everyone in the body shop needs to read it, from technician to estimator to customer service rep to shop owner. Everybody needs to read this. And so, Toby, well done and welcome back. But let's talk a little bit about what takes place. Remember I told you that Toby has this truck and he would drive up around California. I haven't spoken to Toby in probably 10 years. So I'm going to assume he still has his truck and his trailer and he's still driving around back and forth in California, working with shops and training and coaching, because he mentions in the article that he was working with a shop. The shop is a DRP, and there was a aftermarket frame rail section, and I went, holy bejesus. Like, I don't keep track of aftermarket parts. They're not in my realm. They're not something that I consider, that I think about, that I even want to talk about. I keep the recall list handy. It's one of my favorite things to use in negotiation against aftermarket parts. But I'm not regularly looking at them. We don't work with a lot of DRP shops. Like, my philosophies and my training don't do so well in those environments. So we're not in there a lot. I did not know anyone was manufacturing aftermarket structural component. I mean, like, well, I guess core supports were always really technically structural and rebars, but a frame rail, like, you got to be kidding me. Like, or, basically a cap. So it's a frame cap, so to speak. But anyway, so in this article, Toby goes on and he orders the OE part from Toyota. He orders the aftermarket part. He also later in the article does some tensile strength testing on something different completely. That's very, very interesting. So I think all the things that we probably would have gotten from Toby in 2010, we're just getting from him now. As you can see, and I'll share this again. So for those of you watching the video, if you're not watching the video, if you're just listening to this on Spotify or Amazon Podcasts or whatever, please take the time to go to YouTube to get the video version so you can see the amazing work that Toby did here. But he takes the part and component and really side by side and breaks them down. And I really, really liked this. And then the reason I've called it out, when we look at the angle differences, so it's not just material. That's one thing that can make a part different. How that part is shaped, welding, quality, connections. I mean, different welds. He calls out everything. But then we look at the shape. We know, we talked about it in several episodes of Coffee Talk. We know that degrees matter. 1 degree of difference at the car when it comes to ADAS can be exponentially, it could be 150 feet once it gets out to wherever that algorithm is supposed to be looking or seeing for ADAS to work or whatever. Well, if everything bolts up to these structural components, and we have a degree difference. The front rail section of the aftermarket part angle is 4.3 degrees. The OE part is 9.4 degrees. So when we think about, like, I think it was Essential Technologies and some other people put out some white papers like, what does 1 degree matter? iCar had an article over what 1 degree from a windshield installation, what's the effects of just 1 degree off? And you have an aftermarket component that is substantially off. We're talking almost like, 4 or 5 degrees, basically. That's insane. Like even if you install the component, let's say you're the DRP or you're the shop that went, well, our policy only says you can get aftermarket parts, so that's all we can put on the car. If you were the one dumb enough to put this part in, even if your technician installed it properly, right? We don't know what the substrate is, so whether the OE replacement procedures are the right replacement procedure for that, we don't know. But let's say you follow the technician follows the procedures precisely. He's still wrong because the part's wrong. There's no way that's testing. When I look at when aftermarket companies tell me they test parts, they crush test them, right? They don't assemble a car and run it into a wall and go, did it do as good as the OE? They put these parts in small, contained, that part by itself, and then they crush it or stress test it in comparison. But we know that cars are a sum of their parts. It's not just that part, it's how that part attaches to the other parts around it and how it affects the parts that are around it. Specifically, if I'm bolting up front structure to this, and then within that front structure is going to be ADAS components that have to have a certain view. Just fantastic work. Like I said, I haven't spoken to Toby in years. Welcome back, Mr. Chess. Please continue on this this direction, because we should have been having these conversations in 2010. They got a little squashed. We're in a new age. It's 2025. And we can reach more shops in a way that we couldn't in 2010. So just glad it's back. Please go download this. Please print it. Please save it as a PDF. Share copies of this with customers. Share copies of it with your employees. But just share it. I don't normally, like I said, I don't normally like to send people toward the trade press in this industry for comment or for. I don't like to give people clicks and visits and all of that stuff, but this is just really well done. And how he did the comparisons and what he did. It is what it is. Also, if you're installing that part or you have installed that part in the past, you probably need to call some customers and ask them to come back. You got some repairs to do, or you got some cars you need to total or something that you need to take care of. Because once you install it, it's on you as the shop. It's no longer on the insurer anymore at that part. So anyway, well done. Well done. All right. Let's talk about another little publication. It's no secret. I don't hide it. I'm not a fan of CCC. Now it's a great estimating system. Like I wrote in all of them for over 25 years. I don't do a ton of writing now. That's what I have Larry for, right? So estimating wise, it is a very friendly system. There was a reason why insurance companies loved it, but it's a very friendly system. I just don't like what it became, and I don't like how it became. It really focused on insurers and sort of left, and it just sort of left the tracks of what that company was when it was kind of first started, and the people that first, were running around the country, driving in cars and meeting with insurance companies and body shops, to where it is today. So, but the crash course report is a good way to find sort of some industry insights. You just have to peel it back very carefully in layers, and get the right information from it. So this is the most recent report. You can go get a copy of yourself. CCC doesn't charge for it, so I'll give them some props for that. You just have to enter your information, kind of tell them who you are, and then you'll get a download of it and you can read through it. What I want to call your attention to is this, they're calling it the Auto Insurers Balancing Act. But for those in the insurance, if you're in the claims business, this is important. If you're in the body shop business, you better perk up, turn up the volume and pay attention on the next like 5 minutes of what we're going to talk about here. So CCC data indicates the total industry claim count. So that's total claims available. And if we're going to talk about this through the eyes of the data, like you have to figure out where you're getting your data from, right? Like, so CCC is not connected to every insurance company's hardlined into their offices, and they're getting every claim report. They're getting basically what comes through that needs something done by CCC, whether that's going to be a total loss settlement, an estimate, whatever. So that's where they get their data from. Of those that need some sort of service that interacts sort of with our industry, it's down 8.5% year over year. We have seen a steady decline in claims. It's been in that 3-4% over the last couple of years. I've talked very openly about a lot of staffing plans. I mean, it goes back. I've shared a brochure several times on show that was from the year 2000. And it big picture of Ed Rust on the front cover, and it was, State Farm 2000, what's happening and where are we going to be? Insurers plan out 10 to 15 years ahead. So they're not, I mean, us in the small business world, we're kind of like, we're lucky to plan to Tuesday, right? Like, long-term planning is hard because we're just in this constant dumpster fire of living our lives and trying to keep things going. But insurance companies plan 10 years or more out. Like, they can't be reactive. It's too big. Those businesses are way too big to be reactive. So they have to try to plan. Well, about 2008, 2007, around, well, it was probably before that. So maybe 2005, around there. There was a bunch of projections about how 2015 was going to be the cliff of claims. And everybody was kind of looking at it. And then changes started to be made around, well, what would staffing look like, and what would happen, and what departments would we need, and some things. And there were changes made that were too soon, because that didn't happen. That 2015 hit and we didn't have a cliff drop in claims. We seem to now be there. It seems that they missed it by 10 years. It wasn't 2025 or 2015. It ended up being 2025 that we're really hitting the cliff, because that's a huge drop. Now you feel it as shops. You feel it. It's slow. You don't have the claims you used to have. You don't have the claims. You don't have the repairs you used to have. Everybody's kind of had that feeling all year. Occasionally you have a shop that's like, I don't know, we're still busy. But for the most part, you've watched the internet. Everybody's had this angst that it's been very, very slow, so to speak. Well, now we have scientific and mathematical evidence to support why it's slow. We're down. It's a significant amount. If we go back down here and we get into the discretionary nature of claims, this is something that you're really going to want to pay attention to. Something I think Mike Anderson's probably been talking about all year, and he had a podcast that was pretty interesting. It was covering stats. It's kind of like, he likes to look at numbers. He's got an accounting background. He's really good with numbers. I am not. And that's why we have to have people with right brains and people with left brains to get the world together. But if you look at this discretionary nature of claims, it's basically saying that the share of repairable appraisals for damages of $2,000 or less, so what you think of as your light hits, the light stuff, declined from 41.5% in 2019 to just 25.5% through June of 2025. With higher deductibles and potential for claim filing to affect insurance rates, consumers are simply not filing smaller claims, choosing instead to pay out of pocket or live with the damage. This discretionary filing behavior is a direct consequence of financial pressure. Now, debate. How much more of that are we seeing as just consumer pay, no insurance company involved? How much of it are we seeing with people living with damage that wouldn't have lived with it before? Hard to say. How much of it is people are writing better estimates and realizing that I can't do anything for $2,000 or I can't rotate your tires for $2,000 or less when you think about what all's on these cars and what all triggers. There's a lot of stuff in here. But we do know that customers are, what is it? They don't necessarily look to file claims like they used to. They're very conscious of, will this make my premiums go up? Will they cancel me? Will they, will they do whatever? So yes, that's happening. So we have an overall decline of claims, whether that's less accidents, whether that's people choosing not to file claims, people choosing to pay out of pocket, whatever. But we definitely have this lowering. I would say from the overall thinness that shops are feeling, it's not that people are just not turning in claims, but showing up at shops and saying, I want to pay this out of pocket. But if we do have a threshold in a consumer's mind, like, unless I can't open the door or my headlight or taillight's out and I'm now illegal, I can't drive the vehicle or whatever. Like if consumers are accepting certain damage and not repairing it, but there's like a bridge between what I'll pay for and then when I think I have to get insurance involved. If that is in fact a growing segment of business, which is Anderson has spoke about a couple of times, about sort of this uptick in customer pay work. If that is true, then I want to go back to what we opened, kind of the show with today. It's very, very important that you tell the story of what it takes to get a car repaired. You don't want to be in this race to the bottom. I mean, whether we're going to end up back where, when I look at this and think that we're going back into this customer pay world, for those of you that remember or were around when it was go get 3 estimates and turn them in, right? Like where you had people shopping, and if a consumer believes that let's say I get 3 estimates, all 3 of these estimates are all going to fix my car. In their mind, they're the same. In our mind, we look at them and go, God damn, like huge difference. Like I used to get that all the time where I'd have shops back when we did the 3 estimates, right? Shops that thought if they wrote the lower estimate, they were going to get the job and then they would just supplement it later. Like there was all these games. We always seem to have to be playing these games, so to speak. But you're going to really need to control the narrative in your market. And if you don't, then if we're going to have more consumer pay, we're going to have less insurance claims, we're going to have less repairables, more total losses. As all of this starts to shrink, then you're going to need to really make sure that you're out in front of positioning your business for the work you want, not positioning your business as we're a body shop, we work for you, not the insurer. Like, okay, that's cute. But if somebody's out like just shopping for it and they're going to pay for it on their own, then none of that stuff matters. So our traditional talking points that we may have had in the collision repair industry for how we talk to a consumer and what we promise them may be dramatically and drastically shifting, where you're going to have to get in the more I'm gonna okay, so Mako or CarStar Driven Brands or whatever had a president for a while, and he had come from Taco Bell, like Taco Bell, Burger King, or whatever. Jose Costa was his last name. I can't remember. Anyway, he's the one that did the Undercover Boss episode. I got to have lots of conversations with him, which really smart guy, really great at marketing, really good at consumer facing marketing. I think now he works with like it's some national car wash chain or whatever. But that whole perspective, and I'm not a big fan of, I've always thought, okay, you can't really bring somebody in that's working at Taco Bell that understands our industry. And back then, correct. Maybe not now. Because now maybe our industry will become more consumer consumed. Basically, it's the consumer that becomes our primary audience. We've always said the consumer should be the customer, but what we all meant was that we should be thinking about properly fixing the car, but we should be thinking about getting our money from an insurance company, right? But now maybe the money's going to come from the consumer, and so we're going to be a different sales focus, a different way of talking to consumers, a different way of positioning our business. And my dad used to say, there's an ass for every seat, but there may not be a seat for you in my lobby. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and I think that's great. I think there has to be. I always tell people there has to be a right and a left, so you know where the middle is. And if we lose the right or the left, we lose the middle, and that the middle is so important, right? So whether whether you're way right, way left on when it comes to this industry, anti-insurer, pro DRP, whatever you are, I think that's great. But you've got to figure out where you're going to fit in this new world and who or how you're going to market yourself, what you're going to position yourself for, and who is your consumer. There's Ruth Chris and there's Logan's Steakhouse or Roadhouse, Texas Roadhouse or whatever. They both sell a steak, but they sell it very differently. And it costs a whole lot more at one than the other, but I can go order a filet and a baked potato at both. So you're going to have to decide where you're positioning yourself and your services and what you're going to do. Pay more and more attention. This restriction of claim volume is going to continue. Total losses will continue to increase, which means there are less repairables in the pool for each market. And depending on how many competitors are in the market, if you're going to go from 10,000 claims, let's just say if we take this, 8% drop or whatever, if we're going to go from 10,000 claims in a market to 8,000 claims in a market, but we still have 50 body shops in that market, somebody's getting thinner. That's all I can say. And then there will be the insurers' drive to push their agenda. We're going to talk about that later too, but they're going to push what's in their best interest. And in their best interest, it makes sense. National MSOs are always going to win that race, right? So even if you're on a DRP, it doesn't mean you're going to get claims. I think there's a lot of people right now that believe that the survival of their business is to get on a DRP, but that doesn't mean you're going to get claims. It just means you're going to, the very few that you will get, you're going to probably make less money on. So be very, very careful what decisions you make, specifically as we go into this fourth quarter. Everybody's very anxious and nervous, and it's all understandable. But there's no single solution to any of the problems that we have in this industry right now. So be very, very careful what decisions you make and keep an eye on the changing times. All right, let's talk about changes in right to appraisal. There's lots of cool things going on between the state of Washington, Texas, Rhode Island. There's more appraisal bills that are being, sort of brought up and done, and those are not short-term. They're not short-term solutions. It takes years and years and years to get a bill through. It does help once other states start having a bill, because then a state looks around and go, oh, so we're not the only one. So once others start to happen, it does get a little bit of a faster pace. There is discussion among different organizations that are in the national lobbying about whether we need federal regulation. We have, thanks to 2007, 2008, we sort of have a federal regulatory arm for insurance now. But do we need to be active? Do we need national bills or whatever's out there? As we look through what's happening, the important thing for everyone to remember, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. As you get something, the other side will somewhat push back to try to rebalance the scale, so to speak. So as we look at what's going on, particularly, I think about Rhode Island right now and some of the issues out there. There's always this tennis match going back and forth where people are stating their wants and how what you want oversteps my rights and whatever. So Washington is seeking, because they're going to register appraisers, and if you don't pick an appraiser within a certain time limit, the estate is allowed to appoint somebody, and they need to appoint them from a list. So Washington's looking at what it's going to take to be on that list. Like, what are some of the criteria you have to have? And I think this is critical, because I get these calls all the time. You're at a shop that's got slow. You've sold your shop and now you're wondering what to do. Or you think you're going to have this side business that'll make you a little extra money to make up the difference for what you're in. Everybody wants to be an IA now. There's some criteria and some knowledge you have to have. And you may have been a fantastic estimator at a body shop, but that doesn't mean you're going to be a good IA. And then what does it take what skill set, what should you have? Well, right now, in a lot of ways, all you do is call a state, pay a fee of anywhere from $20 to $50, and suddenly you've got a license. But it doesn't mean you know what you're doing. So I do applaud the states for trying to go, what are the rules around who can do this and who can't? Like, how do we make sure that the consumer chooses somebody that knows what the hell they're doing and that the insurer chooses somebody that knows what the hell they're doing? Washington issued a kind of a bulletin. They're looking at a minimum of 5 years experience. I'll put this back up. So for those of you on the video show, you're like, I'd like to read it with you, Kristen. Okay. A minimum of 5 years experience as an appraiser of auto claims or collision repair specialist. You need to have served at least 5 times on an appraisal panel as an umpire. I get a kick out of the phone calls I get from a lot of people. Hey, I just got picked at umpire and I've never done this before. What do I do? And I'm like, how did you get picked as an umpire if you've never done this before? But you need to have done it before. And then this one's interesting. The umpire is also required to have an associate's degree or equivalent in auto repair or a professional certificate. This one I found interesting. Like, so I can have an associate's degree in basket weaving and I'll meet the qualifications. But some body shop's going to have an auto repair or professional certificate. All right, anyway, so what does that mean? Certificates should be from one of the following equivalent. ICAR, okay. A manufacturer's OE certification in auto repair. Like what? I took one. If I take the Nissan estimating class, and I'm going to get a certificate. Does that meet the standard if I've only taken one OE estimating class? You can have National Institute for Automotive, so OEM or ASE. You can have Bureau certification through the Bureau of Certified Auto Appraisers, the American Society of Certified Auto Appraisers, the National Automotive Appraisers Association, and the Insurance Appraisal and Umpire Association. I can tell you a lot of those adjuster associations are a group of people that got together, started their own association, and have some do this, check this box, write me a check, and suddenly you're on the program. So not necessarily a lot of criteria that I would like. I've talked to some states that have called and go, what do you think? And I'm like, I would like to have, obviously we had to start somewhere. So I'm agreeing that some certification thing is whatever, but I would love to have a designated training path. Like you've got to take this path. Like you've got to be, or you have to test out of it. If you don't want to take that, you want to test out and prove you have the knowledge, but whatever that is, whether that's ICAR sets up some sort of standalone training path over here that people that want to be an independent appraiser, it's going to need to have some insurance training in it, not just automotive, knowledge, but it's going to have some insurance stuff in it. But whatever that is, and then there needs to be some sort of continuing education where you've got to stay on top of things. One of the conversations I got in last week with a long-term, we probably started about the same time, but long-term field estimator turned IA is still holding on to that the way it was, like and that I know these things. Well, what you knew in 1995. And in 1995 was right. It's not right anymore. Most of what I know is irrelevant. Like every 3 years, it seems like the industry advances so fast that, a lot of your basal knowledge becomes irrelevant. So I get tickled when somebody wants to argue online and they're like, I've been doing this 35 years. Great. About 33 of what you know is completely irrelevant now. It hurts, right? I mean, but that's just the way it is. So some sort of continuing ed thing so that people don't flip a switch and think, I've learned everything I need to know. Look at how much experience I have and all of these things. Like I would love something that just makes that become a continuing ed. Now, part 2 of that is that at the same time that Washington's doing all this, Texas is putting out as they try to get their feet. So, they finally passed their appraisal law. It went into effect September 1st. So we're what, 28 days into into the new world order of Texas. And the Texas DOI has to figure out how to get their hands around it because they're going to be responsible for sort of like regulating and overseeing it. I know they've done a really good job of putting together like a panel of people trying to help and give them feedback on this. But as you look through some of the things, TDI's draft rules state that every insurance policy is subject to the appraisal and it must allow it. And then you get down here and it says it can't be in conflict with appraisal requirements or other state law. Um, Something interesting to talk about that as this is happening, from the insurers from a corporate perspective, and I'm not gonna say that I speak for all of them. I haven't talked to all of them. I've talked to a couple in the top five. From a corporate perspective, we don't have a problem with they don't have a problem with RTA. They don't have a problem with it existing. They don't have a problem with it. It's in the, for most of them, it's been in their policy. So it's been something that they've had to do. It's a policy benefit. Why would you not want to like extend and work in good faith a policy benefit, right? But because there is such a lack of training, no claims department, no nothing. I remember going through claim school in the 90s and we would talk about right to appraisal and some of those things. And you didn't necessarily go back to your desk and suddenly you got them. Right to appraisal was so rare. It was typically on large loss. You saw that more in like homeowners side than anywhere else. You didn't see a lot of those claims, but you knew it existed and you understood the principles and you talked through them and you'd been trained on it. And so it allowed you to kind of think about it differently. When that one rare thing popped up, when somebody, you got one and you're like, wait, what the, like, hold on. Oh, there it is, page 26, right? You totally forgot about it in the policy. The people that are now tasked with this, so whatever silo tower, I've talked openly about how I think it's in the wrong tower. People have it over here under the auto, but the auto became processors. They're not trained. They don't have policy background. They don't have anything. And then over here, you have what people typically call complex claim adjusters. And those are the ones that handle coverage questions and investigate policy and do those things. RTA probably should be over there with those people because it is a contractual benefit of policy. It's not necessarily something that's just get a body shop to write an estimate and see if you can negotiate a settlement. Um, because those people don't have the right training and because they're over emotional anyway, there's a lot of really interesting things happening in states in which mandatory appraisal has begun to happen. Um, Suddenly it's there. You've worked however many years in claims or months in claims, and you didn't really see it at all. And now suddenly you've got multiple shops and multiple people wanting to invoke this. And what are you going to do? We've seen some insurers make some good moves. Some insurers have put like one person sort of becomes the RTA czar for the for their company and everything flows down from them. And I think that's a fantastic and wonderful strategy. There needs to be somebody that has the power to go, yeah, don't do that. That's going to get us in trouble. Or, hey, this is how we're going to handle it here or whatever. So the companies that are doing that have done a really good job. But what we've seen start to happen, there are certain things you cannot do in an RTA. One of them is coverage investigations. So if there is anything considered not covered, it's not eligible to be discussed in an RTA. I had a shop reach out to us recently. They had a customer's car come in, and this just for the sake of discussion, we'll say it was hit in the right front and there was damage on the left rear. And what the shop was arguing about was whether that was included. The insurer's like, the damage from this accident is in the right front. The left rear damage is not related or whatever. All right, that's not an appraisal issue. An appraisal issue is we've agreed on scope, the right front. Or we've agreed that it got hit in the right front, it got pushed into this lamp post, and so the damage on the left rear is related as well. But if we don't agree on the scope, if there's a coverage issue, if we're saying something isn't covered, it doesn't get to go in RTA. Well, this shop listened to whoever Yahoo of an adjuster they had hired, and he said, no, go ahead and fix it. We'll sort it out in the RTA. And the insurer was like, absolutely not. It's not for discussion. It's a coverage question. We've denied it. If you want it covered, you're going to have to sue us for it. Basically, it's not RTA-able. As a result, that being a legitimate instances where an RTA wasn't applicable, I've started to see a lot of adjusters start to claim things are in a coverage investigation. Most of the people you talk to in auto claims right now, the people that are talking to body shops, talking to customers, whatever, they haven't had claim school. They haven't had all of that stuff. Even if there was a coverage investigation, they're definitely not the ones that are going to do it. I don't think they know what they're saying. Someone sort of got this theory that it's kind of like abandoning of salvage or whatever else. You said it one time and it worked and it went away, and you're like, shit, I'm gonna start doing that on every one, right? I can't believe that worked. And so until somebody makes you stop, you just keep doing it. Um, you're gonna, like I said, in states that become where RTA becomes either more prevalent used, like you have an association meeting and suddenly everybody kind of, hey, there's this thing called RTA we can start doing. Or you're in states where it's not litigated, legislated. Be very careful of what is a coverage question and what is just a scope of damage difference. Be very sure that you're aligned before anything is takes place, because I think you're going to see a lot more insurers accidentally, not from a corporate level, but from a field level, because they think they're doing the right thing, start putting things and going, no, 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 this isn't going to be, we can't RTA this because we have a coverage question. Um, and that's not a shield. I don't get to use coverage investigations as a shield to avoid RTA. So be very, very careful. I'm seeing coverage investigations also pop up as a reason for denial of total loss fees. They're sort of throwing out this fake investigation, and then they come back and say, oh, well, we've resolved coverage, but we only owe from the date that we decided we had coverage. All that stuff before. It's I'm like, if you had a coverage question, why wasn't that coverage question weeks ago before you decided it's total loss? Why'd you suddenly only have a coverage question as soon as it became a total loss and you were made aware of the fees? So be very aware. Keep your ears perked up. People are throwing around coverage questions now. I just truly believe they're using them as a negotiation tool, and thinking that that sounds cool. There's a lot of trouble you can get into throwing around coverage investigations. So we'll just keep an eye on that. I think, like I said, Texas put together a committee. It sounds like they're doing great. Washington's got a very proactive insurance commissioner. So it sounds like she's doing a good job. We're keeping our ears open to hear more of May what come out of Rhode Island. But you never know. All right, what's next on the trail? All right, I love talking about this topic. Okay. Uh, I think I mentioned earlier Yanni's little post that he made about how this is the most silent economic disaster that he can remember of all time. Why there's not a lot of coverage, I don't know. Could it be a political thing? That in the past it was politically advantageous to talk about an economy slump, or now it's not. I don't know. But it's getting rough out there. If you look across LinkedIn, if you spend some time on LinkedIn, you'll watch the churning. Um, Paint companies have had layoffs. More third-party vendors around collision repair shops have had layoffs. OEs have had layoffs. Companies like Bosch that supply OEs have had layoffs. The automotive layoffs in Europe right now are kind of like the automotive industry over there is really taking a hit. Whether we blame it on EVs or any of that stuff, I mean, basically, it's just not a good time for buying a car right now, and so people aren't buying cars, and so people aren't wrecking cars. Apparently, like it's just all over the place. If you are reliant on a vendor for things in your business, and that vendor is whatever it is, just keep track of how healthy and how things are for them. I was looking at a slew of layoffs from Sherwin-Williams. I was looking at a slew of layoffs across ADAS companies in the industry over the last couple of weeks. It's rough. I mean, for a couple of the ADAS companies, I do not feel sorry for you. You forgot and you went and cut a deal with an insurer, and you leaped over your primary customer as the body shop, and you got what you wanted. The insurer is now looking at pricing, and you said you could service it for that. So get your little trucks a running and get all over town and do that. But if you are beholden to a vendor, always, what's that? Check on your friends or family or whatever. Check on your vendors and be ready to pivot, whatever that pivot would look like for whatever that vendor is. If it's your paint material, if it's your jobber, if it's your ADAS supplier, if it's your glass guy, whatever it is, make sure that you have a pivot plan. If you don't have one, get one together. Rachel James runs our financial expert and guru, and she runs our business group. So we have a virtual 20 group, and Rachel talks about a lot of things. And one of the things that we talk about is having those plans for what happens. Like, what is your plan if you only have one painter in your business and you can't paint? What is your plan for if you lose that painter? What is your plan for if this vendor goes bankrupt and you have to get a new vendor next week? And how many cars? And what's your, like, have a pivot plan. I got to be involved in some planning sessions back, in the insurance industry when we were planning for, well, what happens if a tornado wipes out home office? What happens if, all of California earthquake, and you had these contingency plans for how you were going to handle large disasters so that we wouldn't all be standing in corporate one day and going, oh my God, what do we do now? Like, there has to be a starting point for how we move forward. Body shops, you need to have contingency plans. You need to be able to pivot for whatever that need is. Just make sure. I think we're going to see more of this going into the fourth quarter. Everyone was kind of hoping that by the time we got to the fourth quarter of this year, we would have some sort of economic revival, and sort of be pulling out of it. I don't know whether we're going to get that or not. Like, numbers aren't my thing. All I do is kind of set in the soup, so to speak, and how do I feel? And if I feel like things are getting better, but from the ground, grassroots, looking up, it doesn't feel like it's raining a lot lately. So just make sure that you have those pivot plans. But then what does that sort of mean for the rest of the industry? I saw a couple of broadcasts or a couple of posts, some videos and some things over the last couple of weeks. And of course, I commented on one that we don't have a tech shortage. We don't have a tech shortage. And somebody, can you elaborate on that? Well, I did that once in a panel discussion at an industry event out in California, and everybody got pissed at me. So, obviously the answer is yes. I would love to do that again and make everybody mad. If we look at everything holistically, even the stuff we've just talked about here today, claim count is down. All the people aren't buying cars, so all the supportive industries around that are suffering and having layoffs between OEs and tier one suppliers and all that kind of stuff. As I go online and I go in and out of groups, and it started probably February of this year. You almost on a daily basis see people posting, "I'm looking for a job," and it's estimators, it's technicians, it's managers. It's just about everything that we have in this industry. Every job opening, you see people posting, "I'm looking for a job. I can't find one. I've been out of work for 3 or 4 months." If you believe what you see in the trade press and what's presented at industry events or whatever, we have this huge shortage, not enough people to do this job and whatever. And what that did was it sort of led to a overinflation of value. You had shops sort of, you have technicians pay me $2 more an hour and we'll leave. You had people trying to pull people from different places, and I had estimators that are like, "I'm a $100,000 estimator." No, you're not. You can't write a bumper cover. Like, you're not a $100,000 estimator. Everybody seemed to think that they had this inflated value because there was this shortage. We all felt that there was a scarcity. So this scarcity of labor drove supply and demand, and everything goes up. And I'm over here in the corner for the last 15 years going, yeah, we ain't got a problem. We have a vision problem, but we do not have a tech shortage problem. And so, as that claim count has decreased, we just don't need as many people as we've had in the past, and that's going to continue that way. Total losses will increase. Whether customers don't turn in claims and live with damage because they don't want to rate increase, or they don't want to get canceled. We have too many shops. We've always felt we've had too many shops. As the industry seeks to sort of right itself, in other words, with size, right? Unfortunately, probably some of the wrong people are going to survive. whether that's the consolidation of the corporate MSO and those people will survive this, whether they'll be the ones that don't survive it because people don't want to work at those places. We'll just see. But we're going to end up, as it continues to shrink, more and more people every month are going online and posting that they're looking for a job. You have shop managers that are willing to go back to the floor and be technicians. You have, painters that are looking. You have just about everything I can think of out there has people that are looking for it. You had, so Anderson put a thing out that said when he surveyed in his Who Pays for What, record low percentage of shops they said they need somebody, that they needed to hire, that they had an opening. So there's this thing that's maybe it's caught up, but I don't think we have this horrible, terrible mass tech shortage. I think we're also going to have to come to realization that people don't work the same, and people don't think of careers the same way that they used to think of. So people want a job. Sometimes they want a job more than they want a career. And they want to do this for a while, then they want to do something different. They don't want to do one job for the next 30 years and retire and get a watch and a pension and all that stuff. It's just they don't even think that doesn't even register to them. So how we go about finding talent, we're not going to be pumping people out of tech schools and then being able to plug them into available jobs. But when we do have the need, we're going to have to be proactive on that, and we're going to have to look to develop internally or develop locally. So we can't step back and go, yeah, you should give more money to the tech school so that the tech school can go get more people that are technicians. And I go, okay, well, are you hiring? No, I don't need anybody right now. All right, well, then why do I want to put 50 kids in the tech school and have them graduate in December if none of y'all in the market are hiring? What is that? How does that help them, right? But when you need somebody, then we also complain that the people coming out of the tech school we have to retrain them, or they don't know enough or whatever. So we've really got to look at this differently. When I look at all of the money that has been sunk by all the companies, so all that money that circles our industry, the vendors, the parts people, the paint people, the sandpaper people, all of that stuff that's kind of circles the industry, and how so much of that has been pumped into this, oh my God, we have a shortage. Oh my God, we need more. Oh my God, we got to get more people into the tech schools or whatever. And think, did we put all of that money in the wrong spot? And then what's our ROI? For the last 10 years, every time you went, and probably longer than that, right? You went to any industry event, there was some presentation about this, impending doom cliff of available technicians, and everybody in the industry is getting too old, and all these things, and fundraisers and golf tournaments and all of that. And you're kind of looking at it and go, what happened to all that money? Because here we are now where you have shops reporting, yeah, I don't have any openings and I don't need anybody. And you have daily people going online trying to find jobs. I'm willing to move across the country. I'm willing to relocate for the right whatever, which tells you that their market they're in now is saturated and doesn't have any openings either. But that's going to continue to pick up. And when I say pick up, we're going to have more people. I love that old saying, toolboxes have wheels for a reason. Yeah, only if you got a place to roll them to. And sometimes that means you're going to get laid off. If I'm used to doing 200 cars a month and claim count and everything in my industry squashes up and suddenly I'm down to 100 cars a month, I don't need the same amount of people in my business that I've had. I probably don't need 5 body techs and 2 painters and a detailer or whatever. So shops are going to have to start making those tough decisions of contracting and then working within whatever is their serviceable workload. And sometimes we think, I got to take every car I can get my hands on, right? You're going to have a serviceable workload and you're going to staff for that workload. And you're going to have a plan around those people for the comings and goings, just the natural attrition of life and changes. But it's not this, oh my God thing. In some ways, I've talked to a lot of kids that graduated from a tech school because they were promised that we were this industry that was in desperate need, and they get done and they can't find a job. My inbox gets full of those. These kids send messages to Collision Hub. I'm graduating this month from such and such school, and I can't find any shop in X city that wants to hire me. Okay. Did we sort of we set these kids up for disaster? Is it almost, I mean, we make fun of the kid that went to college and got an English degree, and then they say they can't find a job, and we're like, well, did you ever check the job market before you got that English degree? I feel like saying, did you ever check your job market before you went to a collision tech school? Were you believing what the national associations were telling you or what the school was telling you, or did you know that you had talked to shops in that market that needed people? So, um, just some things to keep in mind as we move forward. Pay attention to what's posting up in the groups and people that are looking for jobs and a lot of things. I've noticed a lot of people that 6 months ago that told me that they were $100,000 a year estimator are suddenly willing to take $60,000 in estimator jobs. So AI is cheaper. All right. This this came up. And I've talked with when I go on the road show, I talk about this stuff frequently to people. So a judge in Iowa, the Department of Insurance, and I think the Attorney General's office sent some letters to contractors, roofing contractors, and basically said, you're acting as a public adjuster. It's against the law, which it is, right? You can't act as a public adjuster in states that have public adjusters, and stop it. So this roofing company that operated in multiple states tried to file a lawsuit saying that that was infringing on their First Amendment rights of free speech. And the judge basically in the state said, no, was not infringement. It's regulatory, it's regulation. And so that's just the way it is. I can't act like a doctor if I'm not a doctor either. I can't, so there's rules. Why is this important? Because it's exactly the same thing for body shops. As things get tougher, in other words, you're getting told no more by insurance companies, and honestly, you're getting told no on things that are should be pretty basic. It should be easy yeses. I agree with you. Who would say no to that? You're not a public adjuster, nor are you an attorney. Technically, you can't advocate for the consumer for your estimate. It is exactly the same as these roofing contractors that would go, we had a hailstorm in my area recently. They show up at your house. They go, oh, I can see from the ground. You got hail damage. You need a new roof. We promise you that we're going to take care of all of it for you. We'll contact your insurance company. We'll turn your claim in for you. We'll negotiate with them. We'll do whatever it takes. We're going to get you a new roof. And I'm like, that's cute. You can't do that. So that's not how this works. I feel like that Progressive commercial. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works, people. It's the same in collision repair. You wrote the estimate. You're just like the contractor that went out and wrote the roof replacement. I can submit my estimate. I can offer to answer any questions you have, but I can't go back and forth with you and you have to pay this and why aren't you doing this? Like I can't act like I'm an attorney or a public adjuster representing the customer. And now I get these emails that are forwarded to me where it's like, I sent this to the insurance adjuster and they wrote me this back. Now, what should Kristen, I need your help making sure I have something witty to be my reply. And I'm thinking, why'd you even send that? In reality, what Iowa is doing with their homeowners, please do the same. Please start sending the same things out regarding regarding auto. For too long, because there's so many more auto claims than homeowners, and there's more of a drive to get a customer's car back to them faster than there is to get their home back to them in certain ways. We wanted to expedite that. So body shops and insurers said, we could probably work together and get this done pretty fast. But in the process, we kicked the customer out of this conversation. And now that it's not such a beneficial relationship, in other words, me talking to the adjuster isn't necessarily getting me the money I want. As we become more agitated, you're going to see more and more insurers sort of push for fines or things to be sent on body shops. But here's the thing. It's not your argument to have. Here's my bill. This is what it's going to cost to fix the car. Miss Smith is who selected me. I'm their body shop. if you have questions, I'll answer them, but I can't argue and get too heavy with an insurance company on getting paid. Some shops right now, you're really, really crossing the line. I see shops that are trying to quote law, trying to quote regulations, trying to go, you have to do this. Shops that say, show me the policy. The policy is none of your business as a body shop. You don't get that policy. You don't get to tell me to show you the policy. Like, that's not an option, boo. So be very, very careful. Um, with rulings like this and with the insurers, the management teams right now aren't very mature. It used to be like I got a temper and I like being petty. Like I'm better than anybody else at it. It's like my hobby. But when an adjuster would come to my office and go, this shop did blah, I'd have to go, we're not, that shop doesn't matter. We're going to focus on the customer. I don't care what the shop says about you or your mama. Like it's just, we're going to be right there. That was a hard lesson for me to learn, right? Talk about my mama, I'm going to get in a fist fight. I started working claims in a territory that was where our family shop was. So people, they thought they wanted to talk about my dad, my mama. People in the insurance company wanted to talk about my dad. So I'm like causing fist fights in the parking lot of the claim center, but then I'm also out having fist fights in the parking lot of body shops. But um, like I had to learn that. Like the shop is irrelevant. Focus on the customer. Um, in body shops, the insurer is irrelevant. Focus on the customer. I'm okay with getting on the phone, but I do believe you're going to see insurers start to push back against shops because the claims managers aren't mature either. They get their feelers hurt. They start thinking they have more power than what they really have. Not their fault. They haven't been trained. And I see them throwing jabs. I got sent an email the other day where an adjuster was throwing a jab back and they had copied and pasted a check law from a state and basically was said, because of this law and you cash the check, we don't have to honor your supplement. And I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, you probably shouldn't have like AI'd that. Chat GPT was not your friend, Mr. Adjuster, on this one. Because you look at the regulation and it's like, yeah, here's all the reasons it doesn't count. And that's what the shop was wanting to fire back with. And I'm like, you're not an attorney. You don't get to do that, right? Like this is only three things that you need to say, and then you need to walk away. There is so much responsibility and duties that are owed between the insurer and the customer that are not owed to the body shop. Body shop sometimes because you get in the middle and you do it from a good place in your heart. You want to advocate for your consumer. Because you're doing that, you actually mess it up. You get in the way and you make it worse. You don't make it better. There has to be a return to the consumer being the central focus and central point of negotiations. This isn't about a body shop and an insurance company reaching an agreement. This is about an insurance company determining what amount they're going to pay under a policy, whether that's a liability benefit or a physical damage benefit. And that's between the vehicle owner and the insurer. It has nothing to do with the repair. And that's a good thing, right? Those duties that are owed are good things, right? Don't shy away from those. All right, let's talk about something fun thing. Okay, is DRP actually bad faith? I, I have more lawsuits on my desk now than probably I had even when I was the insurer. It's crazy. And I love it when you're meeting with a law firm, and some of these are really, really big law firms because they don't want one-off cases. They want big national class actions. And you have all these brains in the room, and you're thinking and you're going back and forth and you're talking about things from different perspectives: consumer, insurance, repairer, like whatever. Are DRPs actually bad faith? Now, the Berg versus Nationwide case was one of those ones that if you followed it, it broke your heart. It started in, I want to say, 1997. The plaintiffs passed away before there was a verdict on this one. That's how bad it got drawn out. The original court in Pennsylvania ruled in favor of the policyholders, and then the insurer appealed that, and the Supreme Court of the state sort of split, and it left everybody up in arms about direct repair programs and their legitimacy and some things. Now, what's interesting is if you look at how things have evolved from when the Berg case first happened to where we are today in 2025, this isn't a dead issue. This is very much a live issue, and I've enjoyed the conversations I've had around that. And so I thought I would just share sort of like big picture thinking. Obviously, I'm not an attorney. People call me and ask opinions and thoughts from my perspective. And then it's their job to put the law around perspectives, and they'll get opinions from lots of different people. But if we know bad faith, so sort of kind of the baseline of what it takes to prove bad faith, you have to establish that the insurer had a breach of its contractual duties and obligations. Sometimes those duties are finite and they're written out, and then there's these halo effect duties, and we talk about fiduciary duties and all that, but that you had a breach of your duties, which constitutes an unreasonable interference with the insured's rights without proper cause, effectively placing the insurance company's interest above those of the insured. So a good principle rule of everything in insurance is the consumer comes first. They are everything I do, everything I say, everything I think about needs to be looked at through the eyes of the consumer and through the benefits and interest of the consumer, the policyholder. If I violate that, if I put myself first, right, then that's kind of bad faith. So when we look now at DRP, specifically after the insurance companies now have updated their DRP contracts and are entering with direct relationships with third-party vendors. In other words, State Farm does not own a body shop. State Farm does not fix cars. State Farm does not paint cars. Why in the hell does State Farm need an agreement with Elite Tech or ADAS Think or any of those people? You don't. You don't consume the, like, you don't do that. Why do you want to have an agreement with a paint company? So we know right now that the insurance companies are looking at making paint material deals and sort of using that as a capping mechanism to paint material, very similar to how they've used those contracts as a capping mechanism to ADAS, whether that's calibration cost or whatever. You've leaped over and you're making direct contractual deals with something that you don't do. 30-something years ago, I remember running a parts test with whether we were going to direct supply parts to body shops. And we had to come back with attorneys at that point that went, it's bad faith. You don't fix cars. You don't need to be buying parts. You don't need to be doing anything. And we'd go, well, we buy parts. And the attorneys went, no, you don't. You pay claims. That's what you do. Like, you pay claims. The part cost is associated in that, but you're not buying parts. Like, you're indemnifying a loss and somebody else does that. The lines have gotten so blurry over the years. Homeowners had direct supply, like contents, furniture, electronics, or whatever, that now insurers believe that they get to supply everything. But if we look at DRP from a couple of different perspectives, does it interfere with a consumer choice of repair? It's when we say consumer choice of repair, we're not talking about selection of shop. Everybody likes to say that DRP programs are used as a steering tool. Not really. Like, I'm gonna be on the side that says no, it's a benefit and it's a service. If the customer likes those benefits and services and chooses that over the independent repair facility, well, you better come up with benefits and services that would make the customer want to choose you and not choose the DRP. So you don't get to ask for a free market area and then not want to compete, right? And I think when shops think that an insurance company is not supposed to say anything about shop selection, and that's just not how a steering law works. But what it does interfere with is that when the body shop and the insurer come to agreements behind the fence, so to speak, on parts, repairs, refinish, all of these things that you agree to in a DRP contract, and then now the consumer comes in and you don't tell them those things. You don't tell them that you've agreed to only use this ADAS supplier or only use this windshield company or only use whatever. And so you don't explain a lot. Things are held back from the customer. You don't explain repairs and inspections after a collision. You don't explain, well, your insurance company's told us that they think those are included and are performed by our estimators. You just don't explain it. Like, it's one thing to explain it to me and I can sign a waiver and opt out if I want to, but if you never tell me what my options are, have you as the insurer, through your contractual relationship with these DRPs, have you interfered with the consumer's right to make choices in their repair because nobody's telling them? Remember, we talked earlier about the consumer needs to know that the cheapest estimate isn't a good repair. You don't get quality for less. Those two things never, ever go together. So have we made all these agreements specifically with insurers directing things like ADAS and what they are or aren't going to pay or how much they're going to pay for certain things? Have we interfered with that consumer's right to get a good repair. Per the policy, what is the definition of repair? Our lines crossed in the direction of non-owned property. It used to be you chose a shop. We had some pretty good word tracks and trained people. We had estimators working around it. It's like, hey, you chose our program and we're going to warranty it, but you still make the repairs. Now, when I deal with adjusters in DRP situations, they feel like they're in control of the car and they will make all kinds of statements about things that should or shouldn't be done. I told the shop to do this. I told them whatever. And it's like, it's not your property. You can't direct things to be done or not done to the vehicle because you don't own it. And adjusters used to argue with this. Well, Kristen, we insure the vehicle, and so that gives me a right. Okay. If I drive that car home and I put it in my garage and I close the door and I lock it, do you have the right to break into the garage to touch the car? Well, no, Kristen, that would be breaking and entering. Right. It's not your property. You don't have any right of access or any right of control. It's the property owns. We insure, and the policy says that I will pay damages, but the policy doesn't say that I own the property and can direct things. Now, I can choose repair or to take possession of it. So Erica talks about it. The insurance company basically chooses to take possession, go make repairs and give it back, or to pay for repairs through a third party. DRP is still paying repairs through a third party, but now we have adjusters that step over that line and direct things to be done. And we have shops that go, okay, and I'll talk to shops. Why did you do that? Well, the adjuster told me to. It's not their car. Did you call the customer? Well, no, why would I call the customer? I'm not supposed to. And I'm not supposed to do that. So have we now, because of uneducation, do we have this generation for 10 years or more now, have we had adjusters crossing the line? Are key components and facts withheld from vehicle owners? Yes. I talk to insurance companies all the time. I'm like, hey, what if you just had a disclose? Like, I'm a big fan of a disclosure bill. What if you made your shops disclose? Why would we do that? So if a shop tells a customer about options and things that the car should have on it, so, well, we're going to have a conversation with them and they're going to be in trouble. I don't ever, as an insurer, I don't want a situation where the consumer's calling me and going, but the shop said this. If you're on my DRP program, you're just supposed to do what I tell you to do. You're not supposed to stir up the customer. If you look at Tesla, all the crap that they've done to their repair program is basically, the customer's not supposed to have any discomfort or bad feelings or any whatever. And it's like, it's their car. Like, they get to make the decisions. If they want to go to RTA, that's great, right? But right now we have shops that don't explain things. They don't explain OE repair procedures. And if they aren't going to follow them. They don't explain why, we think that the car should have these things done to them because the insurance company's not paying for them, we're just not going to do them. They don't explain parts. They don't explain any of that. They'll say, well, your policy only, you chose a policy for aftermarket parts. But we're withholding a lot of key information, and that's encouraged through the DRP program. And when we look at incidences and where a shop has gotten in trouble or has had, a counseling session or they're removed from the program, it's typically because of almost like they told the customer the truth and that got them in trouble. And as those documentations continue to pile up, has DRP crossed into bad faith? And then are insurers crossing the lines, negotiating directly with third-party vendors? They're crossing the line. Cutting deals with glass companies that can't put in glass correctly, cutting deals on trying to keep paint materials down, all of those things. You're now making deals. If we go and we look in here and we say effectively placing the insurance company's interest above those of its insured, that's what you're doing. Now I understand that insurance has to be cost effective so that people can afford it, and we can't price it out of the market or whatever. But that's not why you're digging these deals. You're wanting to try to stifle collision repair cost as much as you can, right down to whether it's the hourly wages, whether it's the parts, whether it's the processes, whether it's cutting, blending, whatever. You're just interested in lowering your costs, and you're specifically arming your DRPs to do that. And so now I think the Berg case would be completely different. If we took that situation and instead of a 1997 claim on a Jeep Cherokee, if we took something a little bit better, newer, a 2020 claim, whatever, I think this would have been a completely different result. completely different questioning, completely different everything, because claims has changed between this incidents to where we are now, and it's gotten worse. It's not gotten better. I probably the greatest a DRP ever was in those late 90s to early 2000. And a lot of people in the industry going, God, Christian, it was terrible then. Sure, but it was way better than what it is now, right? So a lot to it. If you're not familiar with that case, happy reading. It'll break your heart and anger you at the same time. But are DRPs actually bad faith? My vote is yes. I believe within the next couple of years, we'll have a new case, whether that becomes a class action or whatever. But too many mistakes are being made too rapidly within the DRPs. And the quality of repair coming out of these DRPs is the worst I've ever been. If you go on TikTok and kind of look for bad collision repair, some of the videos you see will just blow your mind. And those are people they didn't choose the behind the shop guy that had the cheapest build. They went to the big brands of our industry, the big fancy stores with the wonderful lobbies and the beautiful buildings with glass. And that's the repair that they got. All right. Let's wrap this thing up. All right, Coffee Talk's going on a road show, meaning I am going to get out and do a lot more live presentations than I've done in the last couple of years. And I am inviting you to come either ask questions, argue with me if you want to, tell me off if you want to. Like, I mean, like you can, I'm open for whatever, right? James down in Texas, here's your chance, right? I'm going to give you an open mic of your dreams and an audience of a couple of hundred people to watch you do it. So first stop on the road show this week. If you are in Minnesota or Wisconsin, so if you're in the Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Tri-Cities area of Minnesota, or if you're over in the state of Wisconsin, I will be in Rice Lake, Wisconsin, which is about an hour and a half from Minneapolis, St. Paul. I will be in Rice Lake, Wisconsin on Wednesday all day. I'm going to start about 8:30 in the morning. Officially, it's going to end at 4:30, but I ain't got anywhere to go until my plane leaves the next morning, so we can stay in there and yell at each other for as long as, or discuss or dialogue for as long as we need to. So come on over. Topics that I'm going to cover. I'm going to cover insurance short pay, what that is, what it means, what it doesn't mean, things you need to know about it. Negotiation tactics and strategies dealing with insurance companies in today's environment of being untrained and sort of unempowered. The adjusters don't have a lot of power these days. We'll talk about the whys of that. I'm going to talk about refinishing changes around blending. I'm going to talk about the blend study and why I don't like it and why I'm so verbal against it online, and I post about it and all those things. We'll get down to the granular on that one. And then obviously there'll be an open mic session. So if you are a member of the Indian Head Autobody Association there in Wisconsin, it's free, but if you're not a member, you get to come in $50. You're going to get a meal, and you basically get to spend all day, or as long as you want to, talking. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about during that time. The next part of the roadshow, so to speak, is the virtual roadshow. I will be doing 2 sessions for the Women's Industry Network Conference, October 9th through the 10th. Both of my sessions are on total losses. We're going to talk about the total loss changes in the industry, percentages, not just that total losses are going up, but then we're going to talk about how handling is changing around them, specifically for collision repair shops, and profitability. What shops are going to have to do to ensure that total losses are profitable. It's going to be a chunk of your business now. You can't have that chunk of that business just float off in space and totally lose all that revenue. So we'll talk about retaining that. And then we're going to talk about some of the things the insurance companies are doing to not get you that revenue. Obviously, you guys are on opposite sides of the fence. You want to make as much money as you can. They want to pay as little as they can. That's how insurance works, right? So we'll talk about some things that are happening, whether that's abandonment of salvage, deduction of fees from consumers, all of those things we'll cover it. Now, probably a couple people on this panel probably don't want to see me there. So there's CarStar's collision division person that's there. And then CCC's OEM person is on the agenda as well. And there's probably 2 companies that don't want to be on a panel with me. It's them. And so if you can imagine it, poor Cheryl there's probably stuck in the middle. works with Mike Anderson. You've probably seen her speak around the industry. So she's kind of in the middle, and you have like these opposite sides over here. But both of those presentations from CarStar and CCC there look to be very interesting. I think it's always good if you don't hear other voices, then you can't find your own voice. So I always say the right and the left gives us the middle. You need to listen to both sides and figure out where you are. And if you don't listen to the other side, then you'll never understand why you feel the way you do. And then sometimes maybe how you feel is wrong and you need to readjust your opinion on a couple of things. But we will find out where that all shakes out. It looks like if you want to do both days, $150 if you're not a Win member already. You can do single day passes if you want to. The agenda is on the Win website. So if you go to the Women's Industry Network website, you can find the agenda, you can register, you can do all those things. Not everything is going to be recorded. So you do need to make plans to be available for the live portion of whatever you want to hear. I don't care if mine's recorded and played back, but some people are, yeah, no. So don't assume register and then you'll just get the playback. So if you're going to do this, make sure you actually block that time off on your schedule. Not the last place I'll be, but the next place that I will be in October is I will be in New Jersey. I am going to be in Fairfield, New Jersey. So just kind of like a hop, skip, and a jump from the city, from New York. But I'll be in Fairfield, New Jersey on October 15th. It's a night class. It's very short. It's a 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Dinner is served with it. The topic of this discussion is going to be, so you got a progressive problem. For the last 6 months, I've been doing this. So you got a State Farm problem. We're going to shift focus through progressive's lens. I'm going to have I feel like it's like a poetry reading where everyone's going to gather around and I'm just going to read some excerpts from the auto policy and then talk through some problems. But I will also be covering how the role of the field adjuster has changed. Progressive is one of the last companies that has people out running the field. I don't believe that's going to last. I just not so sure there's an ROI there, and there's a lot of expense in field adjusters. I don't know how much longer Progressive will have that. I have no insight knowledge or any insider information there. But we'll talk about what the role of field adjuster is and isn't, particularly now. A lot of body shops, you were so used to somebody comes out and I meet with them and we negotiate back and forth and we've agreed. And then you're finding out that those people have no authority and those estimates go back and somebody else looks at them. We're going to talk about preparing to disagree. Like, you're going to have a disagreement. So how do we prepare for that? How do we set that up for the best resolution when we know there's no way we're going to agree? How you present your documentation and how you don't. What are some of the mistakes with what shops make when they think they have facts and evidence to enter into the equation? We're going to talk about RTAs. What's new with that? Progressive is one of the companies that has RTA in their policy, sort of like Geico and Erie and Allstate and USAA. But what are some of the changes with that? What specifically? What do you do when you don't have RTA? Are there alternative dispute resolutions when you have a policy that doesn't? And then we're going to talk about developing your own settlement strategies and how that works. Like, I'm going to tell you to get yourself out of the middle of it and put the customer back at the center of the discussion. But we'll talk through how you find a solution that is best for you. But that one is through Matthews Auto Supplies is the jobber that's putting that on. You can scan that little QR code there and register. But if you are in New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, definitely make the trip over. I will be there early. So I'm a big nervous Nelly. So I'll be flying in very, very early on the 15th. I'll be hanging around. So if you get over there early, we can pregame, as they like to say, before the 5 p.m. dinner in class. You guys will eat while I talk. That's usually, I guess. I'll also have another open mic session there. So if you want to yell at me, if you want to just make a statement, if you want to come sing a song, if you're like really good at karaoke, I don't know, open mic, whatever you want to do, will be completely up to you. Let's talk about what is on the shelf and wrap this one up. Behind me, you will notice that I have well, you may not notice. I always have quite a camera collection, and all my years, I started in the very, very early 90s. Journalism, radio, TV, those kind of things. And so I have my Polaroids, I have uh, video cameras, TV cameras, everything. Somebody sent me this really cute little, it's a digital camera and video, but it's, it's basically like a throwback early 1900s style camera, and that they thought was cute, and just sent it to me as a little gift. And honestly, it has these different modes where it'll do like pictures, but put like a filter over them that makes them look really antique, and then you can shoot movies with it and stuff. I typically just keep it on my desk because I can do the crank thing, and it's almost like a fidget spinner for me in a lot of ways. But it's just really cute, and I think you can get these on Amazon. So if you have a kid, um, that's just the cutest little, it's the cutest little thing, right? I started taking it with me on some trips and just for funsies, and having playing around with it a little bit. It's kind of fun. So that's what's on the shelf. Somebody sent me a new little camera to add back there to my camera collection. All right, folks, that's it. We only got a couple of more days left in the month of September. We head into October. Now's the time to really sort of get ready. We're about to all hit that tax thing. But time to sit down with the accountant, look at things you need, things you're going to deduct, things you're going to do, whatever. As said earlier, we have a business and finance person, and that's all she does with her group. And they meet monthly to talk about things like tax deductions and preparing for the end of the year and all those things that we hate to talk about. So if you need her help, email Melanie, and she will get you set up with Rachel to have a quick call and see what might be best fit for you. I'll see you. I'm out for 2 weeks, so I'm leaving Tuesday, but I will see y'all guys next Monday for coffee talk. Have a great day.